Listen up, real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and agents. You're in the right place, unlocking the secrets to real estate investing and entrepreneurship. Welcome to the Titanium Vault, hosted by RJ Bates III. Here's RJ.
Welcome to the Titanium Vault. I'm your host, RJ Bates. Today I'm sitting down with Austin Good. Austin, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
Pretty good, man. So why don't you take a second to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do in real estate investing.
Sure. Well, yeah, my name's Austin Good. My brother and I, we own several real estate companies together, including a large real estate sales team, a real estate development company, a real estate investment company, and most recently we started a mortgage lending branch. Kind of live, eat, sleep, breathe real estate.
That's awesome. So that's quite a bit of companies that you have in different realms in real estate. So I want to touch base a little bit on each of them.
Okay.
Which company started first?
The real estate sales team. So it's called the Good Home Team. We're with Keller Williams. So yeah, my brother was a real estate agent before me. He's kind of like a solo act. And he had been begging me to come join him up and blow this thing up with him. And I was in oil and gas at the time, oil and gas sales, getting burnt out. It was high-pressure sales. I mean, I was doing really well, but it's a high burnout business. So I decided to join him up, and, yeah, that's how we got started.
So you became a real estate agent, and you were just doing retail, or were you doing investment properties? At
first, we were just strictly retail. So, like I said, when I came in, he was a solo agent. He was doing, quite well, actually. But when I came in, the focus was to actually build a business. And so we kind of shifted our focus at that time. And if you're a real estate agent with teams, you know that the number one thing that you really need to go after is listings if you want to, grow a business. So I came in, we changed our focus up. We focused on listings, and we just, we blew it up from there.
So how did you transition from retail listings to getting into investing?
Well, I've always wanted to be a real estate investor. I mean, I'm talking all the way down to when I was 13, I was reading books. I actually was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and other books about, I didn't know necessarily I wanted to go into real estate at first. I was just reading any books. I just knew I wanted to make a lot of money. And so I started reading books, and that's how I'd had it in the back of my mind that I always wanted to get into real estate. So I was intentionally looking for deals, and we kept bumping into deals. And we started this in 2008, and that was not a good time, really. If you remember, that was kind of when the recession was hitting the hardest.
Right.
And so we were running into lots of opportunities actually to buy properties. So that's kind of how I got started.
So did you start off with wholesaling, buying holds, flips? How'd you get started in that?
I started off with flipping. So I think the first property we bought, it was a short sale. And we bought it. It was actually a friend of mine from high school, or kind of an acquaintance, really. And she reached out to, she reached out to my mortgage lender at the time. It was weird how that it was just a coincidence that we knew each other, but she was behind on her mortgage, and I went in and actually I had my title company attorney. This is kind of how I met Matt Aycock, he owns several title companies and law firms and stuff. And he actually helped negotiate that deal. It was with a credit union, And yeah, I mean, he helped negotiate that, and it actually helped solidify a relationship with the person in charge of all of that credit union's foreclosures. And from there, I actually ended up, from that relationship, I went on to buy, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 more, but these were, really, really good deals. So that first deal kind of was the springboard.
So I always love asking this question. Did you know they were good deals, or did you kind of just stumble into them and then you made profit and you're like, oh man, this is kind of something I need to do more research? Or did you know going into them, like the numbers and how to analyze the properties?
I knew going into them, and the reason I say that is because I'm a numbers guy. I'm a big-time numbers guy, and I analyze things, very, very well and detailed, and I would overanalyze everything. I would spend, every waking hour analyzing things. And so when I went into it, I didn't know, I mean, of course there's always in the back of your mind, there's, are my assumptions correct? Because, and also, what are the costs going to be on the rehab? But luckily there was another, couple agents that I knew that were doing flips. And that really helped to bounce ideals off of them and bounce the rehab budget off of them to make sure that it was in line. So going into it, I mean, I wasn't sure that it was going to go exactly the way that I had planned, but I wasn't worried about losing money.
Right. So you get these 10, 12 short sales through this relationship. Where did the business progress from there?
Well, so that was one source, and actually that guy, when he left his credit union to go to a different credit union, that's like the best thing that can ever happen. It's kind of like when two parents get divorced, and now you've got two Christmases. So he introduced me to the guy taking over his position, and now I've got two of these contacts. Now,
right.
I just bought a property in Denison, but that was the first property that I bought from either one of those two guys in like 3 years, just because, the economy's been so good, they actually haven't had any foreclosures.
Right.
And I really just bought that one to keep the relationship. I think I ended up making about $2,500 on it. I really didn't want it, but I wanted to continue to be the guy for them. And other ways I would find, I mean, other agents in the office started knowing what we were doing, and they were bringing certain deals to me.
Right.
And there were certain, I was kind of subscribed to a couple websites where you would pay for leads, and this was before it got, saturated. But, I would pay for leads, and this would go twofold for us because they were also listing leads. So if we couldn't list them, or if we couldn't buy them, then we would list them. So we kind of had, extra way to monetize those leads. And then we started sending out, postcards as well. And
right.
That just helped, fuel the fire on acquisitions.
So you say you have a development company. So how did that company come about?
Well, actually, kind of just right place, right time. And when I say development company, I mean I'm not in the business of developing things to sell them. I'm in the business of just acquiring passive income properties. So it just happens to be that one of a good buddy of mine who's been like a huge wealth determiner for me. I had told him, look, I'd bought, 3 or 4 rental properties. I wanted to expedite things. I was thinking in terms of units. I've been reading, all sorts of different books that says, if you want to get to this point, These onesie-twosie deals are just not gonna cut it. So I kind of put it out there in the universe, talked to everybody, said, look, I'm looking for something big. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew, like, hey, I've got we've saved some money, which, by the way, my brother and I have lived off of, in those first years, barely anything, and even continuing. I mean, we're kind of conservative. We're real conservative on what we actually pay ourselves versus, what we make, versus what we invest back into real estate, which has helped grow it as well. But my buddy calls me and says, well, I've got this deal, got this property. I got two partners on it. And, these partners we used to all be great back in the day. Everything was great, but everybody's life's changed, and these partners are no longer worth a shit. They don't want to put any more money into it. They don't want to basically do anything. And what it was a 72 unit, was a street basically in Denton, with 36 duplex lots, of which they had already built 5. So there was 10 units already built and leased out. And their development note for putting in the roads and utilities and buying the land was about to come due. And he's like, well, I'm willing to put money into it. However, they're not willing to put money into it. So we're kind of at a standstill. So I was like, okay. I evaluated it. And again, I didn't really know how great of a deal it was at the time. And he kind of had to actually convince me. And looking back, I'm like, man, he's trying to talk me into such a great deal. But I mean, I didn't really know, because I've been buying rental properties, one-off rental properties, super cheap. And I kind of evaluated things based on, how much money did the property cost me all in, and how much is it going to rent for, as a ratio. And, but these were new construction properties that they had just built. And so what I wasn't factoring in, or I was over factoring in things like maintenance and, reserves and things like that, because, I'm very conservative, and I was kind of using numbers based on nothing other than advice from other forums and books and taking the most conservative advice for it. So I was using way too high of numbers like that, and I didn't really think I was going to be making that much money on it. But what I was comparing was, apples to oranges, because brand new construction at first, you're going to go through quite a period of time where your maintenance and things like that are minimal. And it's a whole different ball game whenever you're talking like an apartment complex or, consolidation of units in one area. You've got, some economies of scale, things of that nature that kind of kick in to sweeten the deal. But he told me about this deal. And basically what had to happen is I bought out 2 of his partners. I didn't have enough money to buy him out, so he let me take an IOU on the deal. And I think I paid, I want to say it was $154,000 per partner. So I'd come up with the 300 and some odd thousand, took an IOU from him, and what I had to do was I had to go to the bank that he had the loans with, because I needed to. But the plan was to assume the loans, okay? Because at the time I didn't have a banking relationship that would allow me to get that big of a loan. I mean, I think at the time it's like a $2.2 million loan. And, just basically on my net worth schedule, my personal financial statement, I was barely, I was kind of exaggerating it in order to even get to like, I don't know, 600,000, 700,000, and most of that was, really just evaluating your company, which none of my companies really at the time were worth anything unless I was the main guy. So you really shouldn't value them at anything. Right. But typically what they want to see is a 1-to-1 ratio on how much your net worth is versus how much they're willing to loan you. So as you can imagine, I had some, hurdles there, but what it took several meetings with these guys. And I had prepared very, very well. I had a plan, and I was very convincing, very confident in my plan. And I went in there, I was so confident. I wanted to build out the remaining 31 duplexes, 62 units. I wanted to build them all out at the same time. Now, given up to this point, I've probably flipped a dozen homes or something like that, and I started on my first full new construction spec home maybe like a month or two earlier. So basically what I'm asking these guys is to trust me, and I think, I don't know, it was 26 at the time or something. I was asking them to trust me that I could build, 62 units, new construction, one street, and I could do that even though I've never actually completed a construction project from start to finish. And what ended up happening is they let me assume the loans, and this particular bank I could never really completely mesh with, and so they wanted to, and I get it. I mean, I hadn't had all that much experience on that side, and it was a lot of money, and so what they wanted to do was kind of, they let me assume it, but they wanted me to only build, I don't know, like 4 duplexes at the same time, which my whole plan was, this thing only works if I can get economies of scale on the building costs too, because if I can get some sort of bulk discounts and things like that, then it can help with construction. So I was like, okay, that's not going to work. So what I did is I assumed the loans, and then it took me about a year to find another bank that bought into my vision, had confidence in me enough to give me a loan and give me a loan for enough of them. And what we settled on is we were going to do it in 3 phases. So I would build 11 on the first phase, 11 duplexes, and then 10 and 10. So I convinced. Go ahead.
So you're telling me that you not only convinced one bank to trust you with that little of experience, but then you convinced a second bank to trust you just as much, or even more so, because they were willing to let you do it in larger chunks than the first bank.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And well, I think what played into it too is these banks are not only competitors, and these are local banks there, but the 2 guys in charge of everything used to be, childhood friends, and I think had a falling out of sorts, and now we're super competitive with one another. Since then, they're cool now and everything, but I think there was a little extra there wanted. And plus, I had there had been some, they weren't completely strangers to me, or at least the one who actually I ended up going with to do the 11 duplexes and help me finish the rest of it. I mean, he was a complete stranger, but it was a warm introduction from another person that went to high school with them, and yada, yada. We just clicked really well. So, yeah, I convinced him to do that. He believed in it. I mean, he saw what I was doing our growth was really impressive on both sides of the business, the investment side and, the traditional sales side. And he saw that we were also very conservative with our lifestyles and our numbers, and just on top of things had a very good plan for it. Everything was prepared well whenever they asked for anything from me, financials, pro formas, et cetera. I mean, I was very, very professional and those things go a long way
Right.
with banks. So, yes.
So once you got started in the phases, how long did each phase take?
1 year. So I would build. My goal was to try to build 11 at the exact same time, meaning you're pouring the slab at the same time, all of those things. But what I found is then you're really not going to get any discount on your guys because you're actually having to use a lot of different subs because one sub can't handle, that much at the exact same time. And it was doing 11 was just under the cutoff for me using multifamily subs. The guys who do, they have a minimum square footage that they need of 100,000 or whatever it was at the time. And so I just missed that cutoff of being able to use those type of guys that could handle it all at once. So what I ended up doing is I would build basically, we would start 3 at the same time and then just go right down the line to completing it. And so the actual construction and rent up, because I would pre-lease these. And that was another thing. So I would get these all pre-leased. Usually they were pre-leased anywhere from 3 to 6 months ahead of time because about half, a little bit less of these tenants are students. And so they typically, they know ahead of time they're going somewhere for a semester. They start looking much earlier. So that kind of helped.
Right.
Yeah. So we did that, and I think the actual construction from start to finish was 10 months, 8 to 10 months, I can't remember. And then the rest was just to basically figure out, okay, what the next financing round for the next phase was going to be like, and trying to, the whole way, of course, I'm trying to minimize how much down payment and things like that I've got to put because, this is, at the end of the day, this thing was a, gigantic project, and it really traditionally would require at least, $2 million in down payments throughout the phase of, life of it. And I knew I wasn't going to have that amount of money during that time period. So I had to get really, really creative and kind of push that bank a lot to try to figure out, how do I get through each of these phases with, minimum out of pocket.
Right.
So, yes.
So you bring up the fact that you were pre-leasing these to students. I went to the University of North Texas, which is in Denton, where these are located.
Yep.
Excuse me. And I was also one of those students who was looking for housing, and I know that process is part of what made this deal more attractive is because the students would be leasing from you and you could charge a little bit extra on the rent.
I didn't look at it like that. It probably was, and it was probably my naivety that I didn't look at it like that. It was just more like, okay, I've got a bigger pool of potential renters, but Denton was a growing city. It was a big city, and I'd like to take credit for also, jumping into that and knowing that it was going to do what it was going to do, but I didn't know anything about it. I was just kind of like, okay, it's a big deal. Let's go. I did a ton of research, but that didn't mean that I came to some sort of actual conclusion that made me feel good about it, because I didn't know how to really look at and interpret demographics numbers to the point where it equated to how fast these are going to lease up or anything. So, but what I did know is as soon as I took it over, I could see, literally, I put a big sign in the front of this thing, and that's really the only marketing that I've done to this day still. And I mean, as soon as I got it, I think it was rented out at like $1,300 a month, and I immediately saw that I could raise rent. So I think I went to like $1,350 and then $1,400 almost immediately. I realized even $1,350 was low. And I mean, now I'm at $1,550 a month, and these are 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath units, about 1,700 square feet. But the market in Denton is actually good. So actually only like 40% of my tenant base is students. I could lease 100% to them if I wanted to, but I like to keep a mixture in there.
Wow. So that deal, obviously I've heard you tell that story before, and it's such an impressive deal. What did that, after you completed that, what did that do for your business and for your confidence to carry on in investing?
I mean, I did a lot. I mean, it's forced me to learn a lot. I mean, I've been terrified every step of the way. I mean, from the beginning, like I was confident in my abilities, but that doesn't mean I wasn't terrified of, how big this thing was. And so, I mean, what it's done for me is tremendous, because, now I've got the confidence to not only, I mean, I've got another development just up the street. I bought land. I'm doing the same thing, except I'm doing it from the very, very beginning, putting streets and utilities in and things of that nature. But it forced me to become a more sophisticated investor. Things, dealing with financing on a larger scale, the contacts you have to have for building that many. So, I mean, I learned a lot of skills. Like, I'm very, very good at, putting together packets for banks, financial statements, this, that, and the other. I've been forced to really learn financials very well. I mean, I'm not an accountant by any means, but I can tell you that I'm very. I can sit there and talk to them and completely understand everything. I was doing all my own bookkeeping, and I still to this day. One of my employees does the vast majority of it, but he's an extremely smart guy. And then we get together on the more complicated, journal entries and things like that. But I can't tell you how much. I mean, that's big advice I would give to people. I think a lot of people try to, with the right intentions of outsourcing that, like it's not a dollar producing activity, and I get that it's not, but I'd say don't outsource it until you completely understand, how it works, how these financial statements work. I mean, what's a balance sheet? What's an income statement? How do these affect, things? It's really important. So I've skilled up on that. And then I just completed the cash out, refi, and, compared to like dealing with banks and getting financing with local banks and stuff, I mean, it's, in a lot of cases, once you get going, once you convince them, I mean, I can get, loans for $8 million easier in some cases on some certain things than I can get a, Fannie Mae home loan for my own personal house. I mean, it's kind of silly, but it's almost, true, completely. There are some things that are obviously more complicated, but
right.
But the reason I bring that up is because then I had to learn how to deal with agency loans on a large scale. So I just did a $9.4 million cash out refinance on that very deal, and I can tell you this: that is the most exhausting process. I mean, it took us like 75 days to get, or maybe it was 60. We had some delays. It may have gotten to 75. But we had conference calls scheduled every single Friday with, I think it was Prudential who ended up doing the loan. But, I mean, I had, my legal counsel. They had their legal counsel on the line. There was like 5 different points of contact with them. The title company. It's a very, very involved process. And I was literally on the phone with them in between those. Those were like status update conference calls. But in between that, they had question after question. They went through everything, very, very in detail. But it's a non-recourse, 30-year. I think it's fixed for 10, and then or it balloons after 10. I think I'm at like 4.78% interest, which my local bank. I was at that interest there, but they were all of those. The most they'll go is 5 years on that, and a lot of them were going to be coming due in a couple years and such, and depending on which phase it was, the first phase ones were coming due soon, and I just knew interest rates are going to go nowhere but up, and they have nowhere to go but up. So I wanted to kind of lock that in, and the non-recourse portion of it is huge, because when you go to borrow more money, you can actually put that. It's not a contingent liability, so you're not personally guaranteeing it. That's huge, because the banks look at it like, okay, you've got that. It's sustaining itself over there in that asset, and if it ever were to mess up, I'm not in danger of them coming after the asset we're about to loan on. So, right. Yeah, but it was an exhausting process. So to answer your question, yeah, what it's done for my business and my personal development has been huge.
Another thing that I've noticed, because I'm very active with talking to local investors in the DFW market, is that very frequently I would go to lunch with them, or there'll be a guest on the podcast, or we'll just have a conversation, and they mention your name being someone who has reached out, helped them, mentored them on different deals or how to deal with banks. Is that a product of this particular deal giving you the confidence, or is that just something that you want to give back to the community? What is it that gives you the drive to do that for other investors?
Well, I think it's a sum of all parts, everything. That one deal. The funny thing is, that one deal I always called as my side hustle, actually, because I literally was running that one deal after I was actually running the other businesses that I considered all of that stuff my horizontal income, the passive income. It goes horizontally. It keeps going, right? And I considered my active income, or my vertical income, as my day job, which is flipping properties. At the time, I may have still been involved on the Good Home team more so than I am today, on the traditional side, working in the business, not really on it. My brother kind of took over working in the business after about 2 years. Because we could just see, it wasn't the best use of my time to work in that business. He could work in it. I would work on it with him, but I would work in the business on the other side. So helping other people, I do enjoy doing that. And I'm real selective. It's people that I know that are in the circle, I guess you could say. They've been, someone who I trust tells me about them, or I see them doing, good things. Then I want to lift them up, because I know that what goes around comes around. And it's, even though I have no intention of wanting anything in return, I just know that if you do that expecting nothing else, you're going to get it back, and probably greater. So.
Right. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, I had Jawad Dashti on here as a guest, and he mentioned you helping him. You're teaching him how to leverage his money and take out loans and to build his business in that regard. And you're right. I know both of you, and I don't think you would expect anything in return, but I also know both of you are going to be in this for a while. You're younger guys, and probably down the road you will do business together because of that. And so,
well, in that specific incident, it was actually, with Jawad, it was more immediate actually. He's been helping me with Section 8 stuff. I mean, I have a lot of rentals and things like that, but I've always ignored Section 8, and he's kind of opened my eyes. That's where almost all of his properties are on Section 8. And he's really, really opened my eyes and kind of guided me through that. And now, I mean, I just picked up like 10 duplex units in Mesquite, and I'm looking for more, and actually converting some of my other rentals to Section 8 because in some instances I can get a lot more in rent. So, yeah.
So outside of the Denton deal,
yep.
How many rental properties do you have?
So outside of that, I've only got 30 single family or half duplex units. Those are the new half duplex units, but everything else is single family. I've got 30. My new development is going to be 58 units. I mean, we just started moving dirt on it, but that's going to take about 2 years. And so that'll be 58. My Denton deal's 72, but outside of everything else is 30 single family. But I've really been more purposeful. I mean, out of those 30, I've acquired. I think I acquired about 20 of them in the last 2 years. So I mean, I've been really speeding up on acquiring rentals outside of the developments that add the 70 or 50 at a time.
How many houses are you flipping a year right now?
I do about 12 flips a year. I only take really, high margin stuff, kind of selective with that. So I'll do about 12 houses at a flip. I'm usually looking to make about an average of about 50K on each one. And I'll wholesale or wholetail a couple here or there, but that's more out of just, not necessity, but, not leaving a deal behind. And in some cases, especially in the last 2 years, I can actually, in some instances, I can actually make the same amount of money wholesaling it than I do flipping it, which is wild to me. But I think it's a combination of people taking skinnier profit margins and, just, I don't know, having different amounts of rehab that they put in. I mean, I do things, I don't feel like I overdo anything, but I definitely do not cut corners when it comes to certain things like sewer line replacement and things like that. If, I've seen it where some investors won't do those. They'll just kind of patch some areas or hope nobody kind of sees it, which is kind of just wrong. But,
right.
Regardless, I mean, so in some instances, wholesaling or wholetailing has been just as profitable.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So other interviews you've done and other podcasts, and they've used your claim to fame is you're 32 years old and you own $32 million in real estate. So I have to throw that out there. But my question in regards to those numbers and your age is, where do you want to be in 5 years from now?
It's a great question. I think that one of I'm not like concrete on goal setting. I need to be a lot better at it. My goal in 5 years, I think of my goals right now are based all around passive income. That's my ultimate focus. I kind of think about it as my side hustle, but I mean, really, it's not my side hustle. It's really the end game for me. So, to answer your question, I'd like to be at $1 million in passive income, and that's between my brother and I, separately. So he would have $1 million in passive income, and I would have $1 million in passive income, and really, it's maybe I undershoot it. I kind of set goals that are more than realistic, and for it depends on how you're motivated. Some people are all about like the Grant Cardone, let's 10 times it, but that doesn't motivate me. If I'm thinking that there's I'm not going to get close to it and I'm just being outrageous, then it doesn't motivate me. But what does motivate me is numbers that do push me, but at the same time are more than realistic. So I'd say $1 million in passive income. I think there's a good chance I'll do it before then, but that's kind of what my goal is right now.
Right. And you and I were having a conversation a couple of nights ago about this, and I shared my goal with you, and you were like, why are you going so large on your goal? And you're right. It's because I understand what motivates me, and you understand what motivates you. And I think that's important when it comes to goal setting. Like for you, setting a high goal that might not be obtainable quickly doesn't work for you. But for me, I like setting that large goal because each step of the ladder, I feel like I'm getting closer and closer. And it's not so much about achieving that goal. I enjoy the process of getting to that large goal. So it's very important that when you're setting goals, you understand how to properly motivate yourself. Because everybody has different goals, but in the end, you and I have essentially the same goal, which is a large passive income, annual passive income. So
absolutely.
So my last question to you is, what is your why? What is the driving force behind everything that you do?
A big why. I always have a tough time with this question. I mean, just because there's so many different things, there's so many different whys for me. If I have to boil it down, I want to ultimately, my family and our, life experience is obviously a huge, why for us, being able to live the fullest life. And, money's not everything, but it definitely allows you to do certain things. So that's a big why. But there is a driving factor for wanting to help people, and I don't mean necessarily a bunch of strangers out there or anything like that. I do mean lifting up people in my circle, that I can have an effect on their life and bring them up. I like to see that. I like to do that, and so I guess that's a couple of whys, but yeah.
Well, I think you're there on some of your whys. I mean, obviously you're well on your way to financial freedom.
Sure.
And then I previously mentioned in this interview that you're already helping other people. I mean, people that I didn't even know. I mean, I'll go to lunch with them, and they're like, oh, yeah, I was talking to Austin Good the other day about this, and I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't even know y'all were friends. So you're definitely doing a great job of hitting your whys and obtaining your goals.
I appreciate that.
Hey, man, I appreciate you sitting down with us and sharing your incredible story with us.
Yes, sir.
I know you're a busy guy, and it's a great story. I don't think it can be undermined how impressive it is to be 32 years old and own $32 million in real estate. So congratulations on all of your success.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
Thanks so much for listening to the Titanium Vault with your host, RJ Bates III. For more info and to stay up to date, visit www.podcast.thetitaniumvault.com and on facebook.com/The Titanium Vault. If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review, and we'll catch you next time on the Titanium Vault.